The updated wedge formation in Rise of Kingdoms has shook up the open field meta just a little bit, but what if I told you that the next thing they add to the game that could change the open field meta, if just a little bit, is actually the museum? Because we haven't seen museum relics, or I should say new museum relics, in quite a while, it feels like, especially because the last release was Trajan and Moctezuma, and like what are we talking about, right? The Trajan buff was just for Canyon. Moctezuma is, I mean, basically nobody uses him. But the next few commanders that are coming to the museum within the next few months actually have a chance at changing the meta just a little bit. So today we're going to talk about which commanders that might be and what buffs would they need to get in order to actually meaningfully change the meta. And the purpose of this video is to do what I always do and try to warn you guys of what might be coming down the pipeline, so that way you have enough of this currency saved if you don't. Now let's be honest, if you're an older player, you probably do. We got plenty of this currency. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a sponsored partner creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, consider dropping a thumbs up down below. It really does help out the channel a ton, and we're also so close to 100,000 subscribers, so click that sub button if you haven't. You might think you have, but you actually didn't. All right, folks, without further ado, let's jump right in here and discuss what the next commanders are going to be in the museum. And the answer is probably not that surprising if you're keeping track of this stuff, but if you're not, you probably have no idea that Yadviga is about to get a new museum relic, and on top of that, Zang Yu. That's right, these two commanders actually launched at the exact same time, which is not what you would expect, because this is a conquering and a garrison commander in the same release window. But in fact, this was how these commanders released. We got Yadviga on the Mightiest Governor event, and the Zang Yu came in the Wheel of Fortune. Back in the day, this was kind of the way they did things. Same thing like with Zenobia and Herald. Zenobia is a garrison commander, Mightiest Governor event. Herald was a conquering commander on the Wheel of Fortune, but mainly was used, I feel like, in the open field. But I digress. The next two commanders we're getting here are Yadviga and Zang Yu. And if we look at Yadviga, honestly, it would be really hard for me to speculate what buffs would actually make her relevant again in Rise of Kingdoms. I feel like she's one of those commanders where, you know, if she was going to participate in the garrison meta again, she really would need quite a huge stat boost, and I don't really foresee that happening with just a tier 1 relic. Perhaps down the line, if she got a tier 2 or a tier 3, like if she got the Charles Martel treatment, then okay, maybe she could do something with that, right? But realistically, single target damage, it's 1500, and we're just way beyond that, right? Like it's not even close. It's a cav garrison. It's the mobility tree. Like what I mean, not that cav garrisons are bad right now, they're actually quite good, but Yadviga just doesn't fit in there. The math is just not gonna math. But I will say Zang Yu is actually a really interesting commander to potentially find himself back in the meta, and the reason for that is because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we did recently see the wedge formation sort of get a 2.0 bump here with a 12% skill damage bonus instead of the previous 5, and now of course we have the new armaments, the new scrolls, instruments, emblems, and flags, and all of these new special inscriptions are very powerful, which makes wedge formation, and by extension skill damage, even stronger than it was just a couple of months ago. And again, I've mentioned this in videos, the primary beneficiary of this change was archers, but that doesn't mean that cavalry didn't see a benefit either, because Hua with Arthur is a very strong commander pair right now, and that's because they just are stronger now than they were a few months ago. They hit harder, and while the future of cavalry probably is not skill damage right now at this exact moment before we get Delta 2, a meaningful buff to Zang Yu could potentially bring him back to the meta. Why do I say that? Well, his active skill is a 3 target fan-shaped AoE with a 30% defense reduction. Now, the other thing to note here with this active skill is that it is actually an 850 rage requirement. I know this says 900, but remember, the 4th skill here at 5 says when this commander's troop is on the map, its active skills require 50 less rage to use. So we haven't seen an 850 rage cycle commander be relevant in quite a while. And one of the advantages of Hua is that he does actually have an 850 rage requirement, but it's only for the first few seconds of battle, 15 seconds after entering combat. Okay, after that the buff falls off. So one of the cool things about Zang Yu is that he keeps that 850 forever, and it's AoE, and it's a debuff on the targets. So if we ask ourselves like, okay, well, what is the kit missing that's preventing it from being relevant in the meta right now? Well, there's two things. First of all, the damage factor is a little bit on the low side. Now it's not horribly low, but it is pretty low. But I will say commanders like William have an even lower damage factor, and they still find themselves in the meta to this day. So question is, what separates commanders like William from commanders like Zang Yu? Well, first of all, Zang Yu kind of has to be the primary, which is unfortunate. That's the way you get this rage cost reduction. But on top of that, we see more stats on commanders like William. He has a 10% all damage bonus outside of territory. He also has 50% attack in total and some instant proc damage. So if we compare that to Zang Yu, it's like, okay, well, he's got 40% attack. That's almost as much, right? But he doesn't have the instant proc damage. That's kind of where he's lacking here. But okay, so we're not going to see an instant proc added as a museum relic. They've never done that. Nothing even close to that, right? His expertise gives him some more skill damage. So okay, well, where is he lacking besides that? Well, he's kind of a glass cannon, right? He's got all attack, and if he's surrounded, he actually slows himself down, which is really quite bad if we're being honest with ourselves. So if I were to give a buff to Zang Yu to make him field relevant again, I would actually just sort of lean into what he does well with one of the buffs and then try to give him a little bit more tankiness with the other buff. So the first thing I would do is I would probably give him 500 damage factor right on the active skill. Just boost that active skill by about 30%. Okay, and that's going to bring him up to 2200 to 3 targets with a defense reduction and a lower rage requirement. So he's going to hit significantly harder with that bump, and also with wedge 2 I think we might see a meaningful increase in his damage output. Now when it comes to tankiness, you could do something like give him maybe 20% health, right? 15% health. That might be something you would expect from a tier 1 relic, or you could do something like, you know, 10% normal damage taken reduction, right? I think that would be really nice. That would make it so he's taking less combo damage, he's taking less smite damage, and that might make him a little bit more tanky in the open field. And so then the question would become like, okay, well, who do you pair him with then, right? Well, the answer might be King Arthur. I mean, King Arthur with a lower rage requirement would absolutely slap. He also has a little bit of health, and he has a 30% skill damage bonus on top of the skill damage bonus that we already see on the expertise of Zang Yu, right? We also might consider somebody like Joan of Arc, although that would be super squishy, right? Like really squishy. So I'm not really sure about that. Or you could do something like Belisarius and just use this as pretty much just a swarming march. I mean, you've got the defense reduction on the active skill, and of course the expertise on Belisarius. He's got the instant proc here as well. He's got some defense here for the tankiness on the third skill. So not a perfect match made in heaven, but it, you know, it might do something to bring Zang Yu back to the meta. So okay, those two commanders, one of them might actually move the needle, the other maybe not so much. What museum relics can we expect after that, right? Well, after that cav release, we actually got infantry, and that came in the form of Pakal with none other than Cheok. Now this is a really interesting release because first of all, Pakal, you know, frankly has lost pretty much all of his relevance. He mainly was used as a tanky counterattack damage sort of counter rally type of situation. Now these days he just doesn't really deal enough damage. People kind of just can leave him alone, and then he doesn't really do that much. And also with him being skill damage, like the other relevant infantry rallies aren't. Now maybe you could do something with like Martel in the rally, right? That could be something really interesting. If they wanted to make Pakal relevant again with a new museum relic, they would have to really lean into what he's already doing, and that would be something like even more counterattack damage, right? Or maybe skill damage taken reduction, normal damage taken reduction. Maybe they give him a little bit of defense, right? Because he actually doesn't have any defense on the kit. Maybe a little bit of attack. But all in all, again, I'm not super convinced that Pakal would come back to the meta with a museum relic, at least not tier 1, because his role of a sort of counter rally or sort of a counterattack damage rally has sort of been filled by other infantry commanders that just do it a little bit better. So it's not, you know, there's not a 0% chance that he could see more relevance with a meaningful relic. I think his probability of returning to relevance is higher than somebody like Yadviga, for example, but at the same time, I'm not super sold on this moving the needle. But like I said, Cheok is really interesting because Cheok actually got a sort of rework not that long ago when they brought him up to season 2. He got the smite tree, he got smite AoE on the active skill, and this is a commander that, you know, if you have seen like Chiskel's videos, for example, like he'll have you know that his Cheok, I think with William, performs decently well as a 3rd infantry march, right? And so, okay, well, we've got now a commander that, unlike Zang Yu, is actually a little bit semi-relevant if you're running 3 infantry armies, whereas the rest of the commanders in this video, they're not relevant at all right now, and we're looking to the museum relic to bring them back to relevance. Well, we already have Cheok being somewhat relevant today, so any meaningful buff here to Cheok that we get with a museum relic could really push the needle even farther. Now, what I would like to see from Cheok is, again, just like with Zang Yu, I'd like to see a little bit more damage factor on that active skill, and I'd also like to see a little bit more tankiness. Right now, we do have a chance to reduce some of this damage, the skill damage, smite damage, combo damage, but it's a 10-second cooldown, it's a probability. It's not really something that I want to rely on, right? We already deal a little bit more normal damage, and we can cleanse some debuffs, which is nice. In fact, that's going to be even more relevant now than it has been in the past with the introduction of Alp-Arslan, who's going to be spreading debuffs like crazy, right? So guaranteed removing at least 1 debuff every once in a while is actually going to be even better soon. So that's really nice. So, okay, I mean, what if we did, again, like a 500 damage factor on the active skill and then gave them like 20% health or something, or 15% health? I think that could really move the needle and make him even more relevant than he already is. Now, would that bump him up to a 2 infantry lineup? I don't know, probably, actually. I mean, if we really think about it, I think if he hit for 2k 3 targets and he had 60% of stats, 20% of which being health, and he clears some debuffs and he has a little bit of proc here, which is nice. 500 damage factor, 10-second cooldown though. But I mean, I don't know, I might be compelled to replace William Wallace entirely if that were the case, because as it stands right now, William Wallace and Cheok, their active skills deal about the same total damage. Cheok actually might hit a little harder. I haven't done the math in a while, but either way, like, they've got the same amount of stats. I know William Wallace is a little more march speed, so maybe that would be the detriment to Cheok, but I mean, like, man, we already have 15% normal damage on Cheok, so it's like even this is only slightly better. Now, you are removing the slow effects in its AoE, so you know there's going to be a lot more slow on the board with Alp-Arslan most likely, so that's nice as well. But again, like, I don't know, I feel like a Cheok with 2k damage factor, 20% health, he might be a tad on the slow side. Maybe that would be his Achilles heel, right? But at the end of the day, you could then probably just pair him with somebody like Sun Tzu, and you would do Sun Tzu prime primary with Cheok secondary. He would hit even harder than he does now. The march speed would almost be negligible because you already have 25 on Sun Tzu, and then you would just run the Bai Chi Liu Che as your second army, and you don't have to use William Wallace at all, and you probably would be just fine with that, right? I mean, cleansing the debuffs from your Sun Tzu is probably really good. Now, the downside of that is, you know, the true damage here scales off of the damage factor, and so if this is only 2k, it's not going to be as good as something like William Wallace's active skill, or really Bai Chi or Sun Tzu, really anybody else, right? It would be the worst of the 4, but even still, like, I don't know, I think that could definitely move the needle. So all of this to say, right, I think we are in a situation that we haven't seen ourselves in for a couple of months. You know, a couple of months ago, we thought about like, okay, well, maybe Nebu, if he got a really good relic, maybe that would move the needle a little bit, and that came and went. It wasn't the case, but we didn't really think too much about Trajan and Moctezuma, right? Like, we knew that those were not coming back to the meta, but right now, at this specific moment in time, I think we have these 4 commanders landing in the museum in the next probably 6 months, I would say, you know, obviously in 2 different rounds. And I think there might be room for at least one of these 4 commanders to have a nice little bump. Now, I will say recently with the museum relic, I wouldn't really get our hopes up too much, right? I think this video honestly is a little bit of hopium. Okay, it is me just kind of hoping that one of these commanders gets something interesting, because frankly, we haven't seen them do much with the museum as of late anyway, right? Like, there's not any reason to really get any of this stuff. The only reason I got the Trajan buff is because I use him in Canyon, and who knows how much longer that's going to be the case if I max out Shajar and Alt, for example. Like, that could be my new Canyon army, right? So, you know, beyond that, I guess William, yeah, I use William, but like, I don't know, the museum just feels so neglected and forgot about lately, especially because there's so many commanders like Cao Cao that, like, there's no excuse for him not to have a 3rd tier relic at this point, right? Like Minamoto, same thing. Why do some of these gold key commanders or season 1 commanders, they don't have have tier 3 relics yet, it makes absolutely no sense, especially when some of the season 2 commanders have tier 2 relic upgrades, you know what I mean? So I'm really curious to know what they're going to do with these commanders, and if they're going to take an approach that makes them somewhat maybe a little bit interesting or relevant, or if they're going to continue to play it safe like they have been for the last couple of relic releases and just, you know, do something that nobody cares about, right? And I hope they don't do that. It's kind of a waste of art assets, frankly. Like if they're going to release a museum relic, they need somebody to design what it looks like. It's like, well, why even bother if it's going to be, you know, 10% attack and 10% defense? Like, okay, well, who cares? That doesn't even matter. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Are you anticipating these upcoming relics being something noteworthy, or do you think that these are going to be just another disappointment? I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and while you're down there, consider dropping a thumbs up on the video. It really does help out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.